morning, good afternoon, good evening, Jar of Marble dwellers and Jar of Marble curious. My name is Linda and this is Jar of Marbles. I'm here. I know Bob. Bob's glad that you're here as well. It's a fantastic day. The sun is shining and I'm so glad that you're here with us. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about empowering women and also talk a little bit about Harriet Quimby. So what is empowering women? What's the dealio? It is the process of promoting women's self-worth, their ability to make their own choices. You may be friends with, related to, partnered with, or educated by a male feminist. Sign me up. Me too. Okay, Bob. For many of us, though, it is up to us to empower each other. And as we know, there are a bunch of women out there just ready to cut each other down. So just stop it. For heaven's sake, it's got so old it's got a damn beard. Hence why the Jar of Marbles podcast is all-inclusive and a safe place to say your bit, feel a part of, and of course that takes time for folk to know that and trust that. So I'm going nowhere. Empowering women and their right to influence social change for themselves and others. It is a fundamental human right which I believe is key to making the world more prosperous and peaceful, and I say that with a deep-seated hope. As we all know, there are parts of the world where women have no rights, men and children have no rights because they are not protected by those that should be protecting them. There are places where international law stays away from and shouldn't. Where is international law where it should be? And it's just absolutely horrendous. Empowering women has emerged as a global transformational movement and we must keep at it. If we all do our bit and speak up, we can, as a force, be a part of necessary change. In Western countries, female empowerment is often associated with specific phases of the women's rights movement in history. This movement tends to be split into three waves, the first beginning in the 19th and early 20th century where suffrage was a key feature, which is basically having a vote. The second wave of the 1960s included the sexual revolution and the role of women in society. Third wave, feminism is often seen as beginning in the 1990s. As a short overview, and it has to be said, there are many, many stories wrapped up in all of these waves. Brave women and men standing up for their rights, doing what they have been told they can't because they are female. It has always amused me in a non-amusing way. What's that? I'll tell you, Bob, how men have over time have given women their rights, and yet we women, we give them their entire life. I mean, I don't know about you, but thank you, women. Anyway, in the 19th century, women's history would have been inconceivable because history was so closely identified with diplomacy, war, and politics, from all of which women were virtually excluded, although there had been notable queens and regents such as Elizabeth I of England, Catherine de' Medici of France, Catherine the Great of Russia, and Christina of Sweden. Their agenda was considered chiefly when it came to forming marriage alliances or bearing royal heirs. So baby-making machines. Well, pretty much, Bob, yeah. So many women worked as unpaid research assistants and co-writers for their husbands, and it is doubtless that they were deprived of credit for being historians in their own right. An exception was Mary Rita Beard, 1876 to 1958, who co-authored a number of books with her more famous husband, Charles Beard, and also wrote Women as a Force in History, arguably the first general work in American women's history. The 20th century saw a significant shift in the role of women in society. Women's rights movements gained momentum and women began to make strides in various fields. Here are some notable women who have made a significant impact in the 20th century. Rosa Parks, who lit the spark that would start the civil rights movement. Helen Keller, who lost her sight and hearing at the age of 2, went on on to learn how to communicate, and despite these immense barriers, she went on to support those with disabilities and women's suffrage. Frida Kahlo, Mexican artist and political activist. Althea Gibson broke the colour barrier, becoming the first African American to play at the US Championships and then on to Wimbledon in 1951. And lastly, Harriet Quimby. What a woman. They're all amazing, and it's just but a mere drop of amazing women in our historical backgrounds. And I just wanted to put the light on Harriet Quimby. I felt drawn to speak about her. So, Harriet Quimby, born 1875 and died in 1912, was an American pioneering aviator, journalist and film screenwriter. I mean, how did she fit it all in, really? Well, she's a woman, isn't she? That's right, of course. Now, in 1911, she became the first woman in the United States to receive a pilot certificate issued to her by the Aero Club of America. In 1912, she became the first woman to fly across the English Channel. Although Quimby lived only to age 37, she influenced the role of women in aviation. When I looked at her eyes in a photograph that I saw, she just drew me right in. She had such depth and elegance and strength. On looking at her immediately, it was just like boom. The career of the first American woman to become a licensed pilot was short-lived but heroic. Harriet Quimby was a New York journalist with a mysterious background. She claimed to have had wealthy parents who put her through some of the best education in America. It is every bit as possible that she was the daughter of a Midwestern farmer. The truth is, no one knows. I couldn't find anything definite. So together with her friend Matilda Moisant, she learnt to fly at a school in Hempstead, New York, earning her license in August 1911. A couple of months later, the two young women went on down to Mexico City, where they astonished the locals who had never seen women in the air. The following year, she made her name as the first woman to fly across the English Channel. Now, while in Mexico, she thought up a plan where she would, before she went on to fly across the English Channel, because she just didn't want anyone else to get there before her or anyone find out that she was doing. So what she did is she secured sponsorship from the Leslie Illustrated and a letter of introduction to the famous airplane designer and aviator Louis Berriot. The quick-talking reporter from New York managed to persuade Berriot to lend her a 50-horsepower monoplane in which to attempt the trip. Interestingly, though, in another search, it says she bought the plane. That sounds much more in line with her smart personality. Anywho, she was expected to fail, and this really made her even more determined to succeed. I love me a determined person. Yeah, me too. That's right, Bob. A male pilot who showed the accomplished Harriet Quimby. He showed her how to use a compass and was so sure that she'd fail that he offered to make the flight for her. This is across the English Channel, promising to wear Quimby's purple flying suit and assuring her he'd land in an isolated location where she could rendezvous with him and swap clothes. She turned down the offer. I mean, how surprising, really? But anyway, can you imagine making such a weak offer to someone like Harriet Quimby? No way. I know. I mean, we're talking about the first female pilot to be licensed to fly a plane in the United States. And she had a flair for marketing and advertising and helped promote flying as a mode of transportation. I mean, that's so amazing. Why is that not internationally known general knowledge? Anywho. So anyway, back to Harriet's flight. 59 minutes after setting off, flying solo in heavy overcast weather, she left from Dover, England. After less than 1 month preparation, she landed on an isolated beach in France. Quimby didn't get the recognition she'd hoped for. Her feat coincided with the sinking of the Titanic. And as we know, the RMS Titanic sank in the early morning hours of 15th of April 1912 in the North Atlantic Ocean, 4 days into her maiden voyage from Southampton to New York City. So people in London were in no mood to put on a parade for Harriet's achievement. But you know what, Harriet? Bloody good on you, girl. Unreal. Her reception on the other side of the Atlantic was also lukewarm. The New York Times coverage was mostly condescending. Oh, what a surprise! Yes, exactly, Bob. Which wasn't surprising considering the paper's opposition to women's suffrage. Didn't really want women to have a vote. Anyway, one editorial stated, "Exaltation is not in order." The writer went on to explain why. Just a few months ago, this same flight was one of the most daring and every way remarkable deeds accomplished by a man. Since then, the passage has been repeated by men, and now for them there is little to no glory. The flight is now hardly anything more than proof of ordinary professional competency. Of course, it still proves ability and capacity, but it does not prove equality. Quimby died in a tragic accident 3 months later at an air show near Boston. Her Blériot plane went into a nosedive during a flight around the Boston Lighthouse. Neither she nor her passenger were wearing seatbelts, and they were both thrown to their deaths in shallow water. The plane, though, came out of it much better. It managed to come out of its dive shortly before hitting the ground and landed without sustaining much damage. Oh, what a woman! I agree, Bob, and such a shame. But anyway, really, we've got to. Good on you, Harriet Quimby. And a wee sneak peek at her journalism and writings. Talk about squeeze so much into her short life. During the early 1900s, Harriet and her family moved to San Francisco, and in 1902, she took a position as a writer for the journal Dramatic Review. The following year, she moved to New York City, where she began writing for Leslie's Illustrated Weekly, and more than 250 of her articles were published over a span of 9 years. Her articles ranged in scope from household tips, home in the household, to advice for women on ways to find employment, budget their income, living prudently on a modest income, ways to repair their automobiles themselves. I don't know about you, but I still enjoy finding new tips. Oh yes, me too. I bet you do, Bob. Tips for fixing things, cleaning tips for hard-to-budge marks. For example, like last month, I discovered that mayonnaise takes scuff marks out of walls, and then add that to your salad. I know. Anywho, for all her subject matter, it would still be relevant today. Harriet Quimby said, "In my opinion, there is no reason why the aeroplane should not open a fruitful occupation for women. I see no reason why they cannot realise handsome incomes by carrying passengers between adjacent towns, why they cannot derive incomes from parcel deliveries, from taking photographs from above, or from conducting schools for flying. Good on you, Harriet. I salute you. What an amazing, forward-thinking woman." And she found time in 1911 to write 7 screenplays, that's right, 7 screenplays that were made into silent films. Well, that's just incredible. Well, that casts a shard of light on this week's Woman of the Hour, so to speak, even though it's, strictly only like 20 minutes. But anyway, a woman of wonder. I chose her because of her achievements, and I hadn't heard of her, but I had heard of Amelia Earhart. And as we know, Amelia became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic alone in 1932. And in 1937, she began her long-time goal of flying around the world. How ambitious, flying around the world. Oh, my goodness. And she and her navigator, Fred Noonan, who shared the same birthday as my mother, the 4th of April, for goodness sake. Well, anyway, their plane disappeared in the middle of the Pacific, and they were never heard from again. A mystery never to be unravelled. Good on you, Amelia. What a woman. There are so many women to mention who were empowering themselves and others just by being themselves. The Harriet Quimbys are a joy to talk about with their strength of will and courage. We, just by extending kindness to others, can empower each other to have a better day. And on some days, it just doesn't get much better than that, does it? It's the little things, after all, that can make a smile spread on someone's face. It is so rewarding when you can make someone smile. What makes you feel smiling? Oh, many things, Bob. So many things. You like rocks, don't you? Well, I have been drawn to rocks, you're quite right there. Not so much a seashell person, but I most definitely do like rocks. I have had a penchant for picking up rocks and placing it in the house so I can see it, sometimes just stand and hold it, look at it, admire it, textures and colour. I just like all things natural, and there ends up being lots of rocks. I've noticed you've got lots of rocks. That's right, I do, Bob. And many of them become favourites, and they've travelled with me everywhere around the world. When I've moved house, the rocks would be packed. I'd like to see the rocks in and around my books and on windowsills and my bed. You really do have quite a rock collection. I do. I expect you would have noticed that, Bob. But anyway, over time, I started painting rocks. First of all, it was just designs, and I would place them in pot plants, and over time, the designs started to become faces. And little did I know, I was teaching myself detail, like getting the details of eyes, for example. I could never envisage such a pastime, born of the pandemic, that would be something that's so calming and so enjoyable. So I found a rock chick in my pocket last week. Did you, Bob? I leave my rock chicks while I'm out on my adventures. What's an adventure like going to the supermarket? Well, yeah, could be that. Yep, supermarkets, parks, cafes. Now, they support my podcast. I paint on the back of them where to find us on YouTube. Rock Chicks is the name of the Facebook page I run. So it's sort of kind of turned into something. It really has. It has, Bob. The aim is for smiles and joy. It just hit me one day, why not paint your female faces on rocks and call them Rock Chicks? I know. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I like the name. Yeah, well, that's exactly what I did. It's my Stone Age calling card. Yup-a-dub-a-doo. That's right, Bob. Good on you. I paint larger ones and give them as gifts, and I paint really large ones as well, like larger ones as in garden ornaments, but now they're truly representative of empowering women in art, which is the core message in this podcast. Empowering people, not just women, just empowering people. Self-care, and over months it developed into a thing, and I'm dedicated to the thing. Borderline obsessive, honestly. Haven't they gone overseas? They have, Bob. They've been taken overseas on holidays by friends who have photographed them in various locations. Has just escalated the fun. So many of us shut out our gut feelings and instincts and let ourselves be guided by external forces and other people instead. If I'd listened to anybody and said, I think I'm going to start painting rocks, most people would have probably just nodded and thought, oh, that's nice, and wouldn't have said, oh, that's a great idea. Point is, sometimes we've just got to follow our feelings on things, especially if it makes us feel good. So in regard to, being guided by external forces like other people, we might prefer the nicer narrative because we didn't have to think about it ourselves. Following your instinct, and yes, take other people's advice into account, of course, but don't automatically let that override what your gut is telling you when you're trying to feel empowered, which is essentially the opposite to feeling powerless. This isn't something you're born with, although some people do seem to be more confident than others, without a doubt, but there are things that we can do to feel more empowered if you're feeling unhappy and discouraged. We have an inner guidance system built in, and when used regularly, can be a real tool to use, and that is your gut instinct. After being out with people and then eventually you arrive at home, say, and you start to feel a bit more centred as to how you're really feeling, that can be really telling, can't it? Was it a great night? Or wasn't it? And if it wasn't, why not? We can be brutally honest, at least with our very own selves, and see what our gut is feeling with no filter, the absolute bottom line. I do not discount how my gut is reacting, and while I might not know exactly what's going on, most often I have a fair idea and I can call out any BS. That has me feeling, say, uncomfortable. It can be mild when it comes over you, like you're bored, and that too can simply be a sign that you're growing, that you might be outgrowing, say, the company that you keep. And that is a great sign. For those that know, you just know. So, Bob, what say you? I know I've got quite good at following my gut. There's lots we can do to feel empowered. When we give to our community, when we donate our time or goods, be it clothes, and take the time to do that, That feels good, and it is empowering for sure. Making more eco-friendly choices when shopping, for example. That's a good one. I think it's important to mention, don't be afraid to fail. If you want to succeed and live life to the full, then you're going to have to take some risks, and taking risks means there's always going to be a risk of failure. I mean, anybody that's done anything in this world has failed abysmally along the way. You don't always hear that part of the story. All you see is success, 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 success. But failing always teaches us valuable lessons, and as the saying goes, nothing ventured means nothing gained. So true. What can seem like a total waste of time or mistake can give us a second chance to do better, and in turn feel better and, yes, empowered. None of this requires overthinking. Little steps and little moves are valuable, and at a ground level, if each one of us do one little thing, I believe it sends a wave out into the universe, and more of us, after all, are doing our bit mindfully, and it is empowering, and it is something to be proud of. And so, my empowered and empowering marble dwellers, this is the end of another podcast. Oh, is it already? Yes, it is, Bob. So, until next time, good things take time, so don't give up. And as Maya Angelou said, you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. I just really love that. Yeah, me too. Thank you, as always, for joining me. And me. And Bob, that's right. It's always lovely and fun. I always hope it is for you too. Really? Of course. You know I do, Bob. I know. Say good day to the family for me. Give the Turkish Angora a friendly nod. And we'll see you next time, okay? All right. Bye.